All right. So get started here. So this is Econ 30 Sports Economics. That's what I'm in. So a lot of your citizens got to remember that everybody. If you're not able to attend, do like go throughout the semester, just wait your circumstances. I always have Zoom. The videos are a little bit weird. Unless I can get access to some better quality stuff. But it really matters what I'm doing. I'm on the webcam because you don't have a whiteboard. So I'll have to use person or anything I'm going to be doing when I'm calling anything. I'll be using this elbow, I think they call it, where I can write here in class. And then there was on Zoom. I switched to it so that I basically switch from slides to show you what I'm writing in class. In class, you can see on the screen. Okay. So doing these Zooms allows some flexibility like the semester, but also allows for you to really get that second experience. Not attending class in person. That Zoom, I posted that pre-class video. It should just be there outside campus, but I'll show you what I've done here today. And then I'll record these and then post them on the YouTube page. Also fill them with the syllabus, the link there. I think I got my head in the slide somewhere. Really, the easiest way. Really, the easiest way is if we go to YouTube. If you're on the homepage, search Fast Sciences, enter. I'll be the first page that always pops up. On that, go to the playlist. We've got Econ 30 right here. Okay. So click on that, and all the semester videos start showing up right here. My one video right now. I'll post this recorded lecture. Another one. Funny that kind of allows us to do actually realizing the advantage because it's not as easy, but one thing that's nice is when I post these, I'll start putting descriptions on them in terms of what we covered in class. So you basically have to have the bank of if your memory isn't great, you can go back and kind of watch that. I got this homework related to this. Find the video that has that search for some problems or material that's similar in class. And kind of have that as a resource as well. So even though it's kind of a pain, it's kind of nice that you have all these sort of lectures because of the way things are. So I want to do that in the pre-class video. We'll go down here. If you are going to use the Zoom to come to class, I would click here to get all the meetings the rest of the semester. So that'll be nice and easy. Okay. This is good. If the audio sounds bad on Zoom, let me know because I think I can fix it easily. Hello. Testing. Let's send that. Let's try. Does that sound any better?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay, awesome. And if you have a question, it automatically brings you in muted. But if you unmute and you can always unmute if you have a question. That way, even if you're on Zoom, you can ask me a question in person. You guys probably won't be able to hear them, but I can kind of faintly hear you guys if you ask a question. I'll repeat the question to everybody here, and we'll kind of progress that way, okay? But yeah, I don't know why it does that. Sometimes if I do multiple Zoom things a day, sometimes the audio will get messed up. So if it ever sounds bad on Zoom, speak up, let me know, blow up the chat or kind of unmute, and I'll get that fixed pretty quick. It's usually just testing the mic. So, all right. So we've got our Zoom meetings here if you ever want to access those. Under lecture slides, I kind of have this first week of lectures. So that's typically how I'll do it, is I'll post the lecture slides for the week as opposed to like individual classes. One thing that I think I see a few of you that look familiar. I think some of you might have seen without masks, so it's kind of hard to tell. But I like to try to keep some flexibility in the class. So there are dates, like for the exams and things like that. But occasionally, depending on where we're at with material, how well I think we are understanding it, sometimes I'll push those exam dates like forward, right, to give us a little bit more time. I'll never pull them back. So at the very earliest, we'll have those that midterm would be, I forget the exact date that's in there, what's in the syllabus. but it could get pushed forward like a class or so. In terms of the homeworks, similar kind of idea. I don't give you any due dates because I typically assign them and set the due dates based off where we're at in class. And depending on how much, especially this class, I like to have a lot of fun with this class. So to me, it's, we can learn a lot, but it's also just really good for intellectual discussion and thinking harder about issues. It is a sports economics class, but really sports economics, actually, we toyed around with the idea of calling it like sport and leisure economics, because anything we're really doing, and we'll mainly focus on sports, but you can apply it to like amusement parks, art galleries, and I'll kind of bring up a couple of, these examples as well throughout the semester. And I don't know, we will be dealing with sports related issues, but it really allows us to think kind of critically about, the economics behind different issues, but also a little bit of the statistics, right? So one of the prerequisites for this is Econ 221, business stats. We're not doing any computation, but what we are going to use is, at least in my courses, I don't know if every professor does this, but I typically at the end of my courses, we introduce the idea of linear regression, right? I don't expect you to know the theory behind kind of how we obtain those coefficients from linear regressions, but we will work on interpreting them, right? And we'll do some review of that. I'm not expecting you to kind of remember everything from your stats courses. We'll definitely start out this week and probably even early next week doing some review of just basic economic principles from like 201, and then basic kind of linear regression stuff that you might have covered in 221. And if you didn't, like I said, we'll kind of go through it again before we really jump into stuff this semester. Okay. Any questions for me up to this point? All right. Also, I'm not going to mess around with this today because I wasn't able to get into this classroom until today. So I know how these work over in the business building, but I think they have these set up a little different. I have to hook into something else. So I probably won't be doing any kind of quote unquote board or Elmo work here. I'll just be talking a lot today and kind of going through a few of the slides, just more general discussion about the class. I mean, it is day one, right? I don't want to kill you guys on day one. So, all right. So with that being said, let's jump into things here. So a lot of these first few slides we'll be going through is really kind of like my summary of the syllabus, right? There's a little bit more detail in the syllabus. I would suggest like taking a look through it on your own this week, but I'll kind of summarize the important parts, right? So what do we need for this class? So there's a book because I have to assign a book to the class. We don't really follow it, but we'll at least bits and pieces from it, and it has additional examples. So if you really want the book, here it is. I put the 5th edition up there. To be completely honest, I haven't even checked if there's a newer edition because we don't really work out of it, right? But if you want just something that kind of loosely, you could identify parts in the book with what we're talking about and just see more examples, I would suggest getting a used version of it. Don't go out and spend a bunch of money. It's really not going to be a great resource in this class, but it is there if you want it kind of as kind of a supplementary material. The main thing that we're going to do is using my lecture slides, but also I'll post them after class today. This first week, I'm not going to expect you to really be able to have a lot of in-depth understanding or discussion of it, but every week I'll post these readings, which are essentially a paper that's been published, so research that's been peer-reviewed and published that tackles a specific issue. And I try to keep it kind of related to whatever we're talking about that week, right? Sometimes I'll pull something completely not related because it's just very interesting and it allows for a really good discussion of the economic principles related to that paper. So I'll typically post these at the beginning of the week, but I didn't want like anyone to think they had to read it before day one. So I'll typically post these at the beginning of the week, and I'm not expecting you to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Really, it's just like, and I'll go over this again on Thursday, but read the introduction, read the conclusion, kind of skim through the middle of the paper. After a couple weeks, we've worked through some of the linear regression review. I want you to kind of look at what their regression equation was. We'll go over this again, but as we work through the regression stuff, you'll kind of know what you're looking for. So I'm not expecting like a full understanding of it, just more of a general idea about what the paper, what the question they're trying to answer is, and kind of what their general findings were, right? So these will always be put up on, I have Blackboard here because I copy and pasted this slide and we now use Canvas. So These will be on Canvas. And then the lecture slides, I put here that I'll post skeletons of the lectures so that you might have to fill some stuff in class. It's not so much that there's going to be like bullet points missing. It's just that I may draw a graph or something that isn't in the slides, right? So when I say skeleton, it's really that, you know, I'm going to be doing some work here, drawing, you know, supply, demand graphs, or whatever it is that we're looking at that won't be in those slides. And occasionally I'll post kind of, you know, a full version of the slides that have something that looks similar to what I drew in class, but I do a lot of ad lib, right? I do a lot of, okay, well, what if this happened? And what if this happened? And I'll kind of post just one example, but in class, we might work through 4 different examples, right? So maybe the picture that I post in the full slides is a supply increase, but in class, we work through both a supply increase and a supply decrease or something along those lines, okay? Here's some important dates. The exams, I think what I'm gonna do with the exam is a portion of it's gonna be multiple choice, and I'll likely put that portion on Canvas when it gets closer, when it comes time to that date. But then part of it's gonna be short answer, which I'll also be putting up on Canvas. I don't know how, you know, what your experience was last semester or the semester prior, but you can create kind of on these quizzes or exams in Canvas, file uploads, right? So it'll kind of be like a take home because it'll be like a 48-hour period. So I put here Thursday, March 5th, but in reality, what I'm gonna do is kind of post the exam, right? Thursday morning. You can complete it at any time. You can start and complete it at any time until the end of the day, Friday, right? Now, once you start it, so that you can see the questions, you'll only have an allotted amount of time. I'll probably make it like an hour and 30 minutes, right? But part of it will be these short answers. So you're gonna have to maybe draw some stuff, right? And so I'm gonna be expecting you to kind of upload files. So typically, you know, all you can do, you know, I would expect most of you have phones, or if you're on campus, you know, we can work out a way to, if you are able to figure it out, how you can scan some things. So you can upload PDFs or even just pictures taken from your phone of your work, and that'll kind of be your file upload for those short answer questions. So we won't be doing that exam in person. Everything will be kind of submitted there on Canvas, okay? Because, you know, based off of last semester, a few of you are going to be out at different points in the semester due to COVID, and, you know, it just is a lot easier that way, okay? Final exam will be the kind of same sort of scenario. It's except for 48 hours. Typically, it's kind of a 72-hour time period there. So we got 3 days as opposed to 2 to kind of log on and do that final exam, because I realize you have other classes. Add drop, withdrawal dates, these study days. I just kind of put up what they are. I forget exactly which ones are going to apply to this class for the Tuesday, Thursday. But as we get closer to those study dates, the ones that fall on our class periods, I'll post reminders on Canvas that, hey, we don't meet for class today. Excuse me. But not all of those dates will apply to us because we're only Tuesday, Thursday. I think one of those is a Wednesday. Okay? Any questions on that at this point? No? Okay. So what's one thing that hopefully you care about with this class is how you're going to get the grade that you want, right? So the breakdown is going to be 20% of your grade comes from the midterm, 20% comes from the final, right? So it's not comprehensive final in the sense that I'm not pulling on things that we did from the first half of the course. The course is, to a degree, builds on itself. So there will be some underlying principles that you would have to have understanding of, but it really won't be a comprehensive final. It'll be kind of like 2 halves of the course, right, throughout the semester. So 20% each one of those exams. 25% of your grade is going to come from homeworks. So I leave this number up in the air. I can give you a ballpark. We'll probably have about 6, you know, possibly 7 homework assignments, kind of depending on how we move through material throughout the semester. I would probably expect 6. If I do a 7th, it would be like at the end of the semester as kind of a an additional way to kind of get some points back. Because what I do, well, I didn't put it up here, but what I'll do is I'll drop your lowest homework assignment, okay? So if you don't do great on one, that'll end up getting dropped, okay? They're fairly intensive. They're kind of, you know, I wouldn't say it's like, so some of my other courses, I use like these online platforms like Connect. And I think those are a little bit easier. These will be fairly intensive homework. So you'll have a 2 to 2.5 week time period from when I assign them to when you turn them in. So you have a pretty long time to work on them. Come in, ask me questions. I want you to, or when I say come in, office hours, you could do Zoom meetings. If you want to come to my office hours, I have them up on a slide here in just a second. But what I am going to ask is that you email me and set up a time, because I can't have multiple people in my office or standing in the hallway. So I have a lot of time for office hours, but if you want to meet, I need you to email me so we can set up like 15 or 30-minute time blocks for you to be there, so I don't have multiple people. The university doesn't like that right now, okay? I will say, I think, I did a lot of Zoom meetings, not for this course specifically last semester, and the semester before that, I did a few for my sports econ last spring, and they go pretty well, because you can, if you're doing some of the work on Word, you can kind of share your screen real easy with me. I can share, I've got a whiteboard in my office, so you can see me do a bunch of work on the whiteboard to kind of help you out and kind of write it down as I'm doing it. So I wouldn't shy away from thinking that meeting with me via Zoom isn't going to be as productive as a typical office hour is. From my experience, it's just as effective. Okay. Oops. I would put these out of order. So online quizzes. Typically, I would kind of use iClickers. But what I started doing is these little online quizzes that I would post after class. So I won't do one today. I will post one after class Thursday, which will be kind of our first one. And the total points for every online quiz is going to be 10 points. All right. So if I ask you 3 questions and you get them all wrong, you would still get 7 out of 10 points for just submitting that quiz, right? So this is like effort points, right? The way that I think about the courses I teach, but also just life in general, is everything that you produce or everything that you're trying to do is a combination of your ability, but also your effort, right? You can outwork someone even if you're not as good as they are at whatever it is, right? So parts of this course are really just effort, right? So this is kind of the one that's purely effort. Just get on, submit that, and those base points, the first question of every quiz is literally just click yes to earn the 7 base points. Okay. Do you have a question?
I might have left my keys in here.
They're right here. I was wondering about
I'm
that.
so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was I saying? Oh, so I gave the example of like if there's 3 questions, someday there will be 1 question, so just from simply logging on, the first question will be click yes to earn the 9 base points. You'll get 9 out of 10 for that day. Right? So these really are meant to be points that will help boost your grade, right? It's just a matter of kind of staying on top of them. And there will be, some days I take off, but pretty much there will be one posted after every single class. And it's due before the next class starts. So you've got the rest of the day for the class that it was assigned. You'll have the whole next day. And in fact, on Thursdays, you'll have the whole weekend until we meet on Tuesday, right? So you got a lot of time to get them done, okay? I'll drop your 2 lowest at the end of the semester. So if you miss 2, doesn't hurt because those will get dropped, right? If you do all of them, then your lowest scores, those lowest 2 scores will get dropped at the end of the semester. Okay? And then kind of the big part of this course that might look a little different than some of your upper level econ courses is we're going to do like a project, right? So every single person is going to have their own individualized project, or I said presentation, right? So I give the option, we probably based on time and what the end of the semester will look like. You don't have to necessarily give the presentation to the class, but like I've had people film themselves giving the presentation, right? And it's really just like kind of presenting like what you found with your projects, putting it into kind of a PowerPoint or whatever your program that you choose is, and kind of presenting it as you would to a group. So I'm not going to have the component where you actually have to deliver it in front of other people. And like I said, most people don't choose that option. Most people tend to kind of write out kind of a paper. And the form of this project will be a little bit more easy to understand as we work through more of these weekly readings, right? So these weekly readings are research that's been done, and hopefully by the end of the semester, your project will essentially resemble that, right? It's going to be identifying a question, kind of having an introduction to what the question is, looking at some of the research that's already been done, and we'll go through examples as we look at these weekly readings and then in class of how you find previous research, how you would kind of quickly evaluate it. So we'll build these tools throughout the semester that will help you kind of complete this project. But one thing that we need for all these projects is a data component, okay? So this is where kind of the statistics side comes in, right? For your project or presentation, you will have to have some data set that you're working with to answer the question that is of interest to you. So the cool thing about these projects to me is you get to do whatever you want. I mean, as long as it's somewhat related to this idea of sport and leisure, right? So I think it's 25% of your overall grade, but let's skip this for a second. I want to go a little more in depth. So here's kind of an outline of what the project needs. So I've got introduction, literature review, description of the economic principles behind your topic or question, description of your data, the analysis of your results. When I say analysis of your results, for 90% of the projects, this will be some type of linear regression analysis, right? You'll run some regressions and you'll interpret what you found in those regressions, okay? Like I said, this sounds daunting now because we're going to be building all these tools throughout the semester. We'll review linear regression. We'll look at all these papers that have used it, continuously discuss how we analyzed these papers and what the regression results were. And with your data set, you'll end up running a regression in Excel. Okay? For some of you, if you really get ambitious and you want me to run some more complicated analysis, I can also help you out kind of using a program called Stata. I won't require or expect any of you to know how to use it, but once we get kind of towards the end of the semester, if you do want some help with that, I've got access to it on a couple computers. I think there's a few in the business college that actually have licenses as well. But all I'll really be expecting and kind of the extent to which I'll expect you to kind of run this analysis would be anything you could do in Excel, right? So anything over that is above and beyond, okay? And then a conclusion, right? So I'll get a file posted before next class that has kind of a more detailed description of what I expect in each of these categories. But like I said, I didn't want to post too much stuff before the first day and think you had to read all of it, okay? So I'll get a more detailed description posted in a Word document before next class. Yeah? No, so this will be what's expected at the very end. So the only thing, let me see, that will kind of break down into parts, and this is only for me to motivate you to think about it early in the semester, but also because each one of you need a data component, I don't expect you to go out and get the data yourself. I plan on and want to help you all get as good of a data set as you can get and as easy of a data set to work with as you can get. So this is why I have the proposal submission, due February 19th, basically by the time I leave the office. Because that way I can make sure I can start working on getting all these data sets together and getting them sent back out to you. Now, what helps me out and helps you get the data a little bit quicker is if you have an idea or a topic you're interested in, send it to me immediately, right? And you know, I would caution on sending me something this week. You can, but you know, you might want to see a little bit more about the material that we're going to talk about and some of more of the papers that we're looking at. But if you have an idea right away that you're interested in, email me. I'll put it. I basically build an Excel file where I put each of your names and what kind of data set I need to get for you, and I'll work on getting the data to you. Okay, so that part, the data collection part, I'm expecting to bear the brunt of it, right? Now, if you come to me with a question, I may return to you with an answer of, okay, this perfect data set you described doesn't exist, but this is the best we could do, and we could still answer your question, right? But shoot for the stars, I guess. I mean, anything's really nothing's off limits. There's so much sports data out there, and I've got so much laying around on my computer that I've never really had a problem getting anyone a data set that's adequate for these projects. But I do need a proposal, and in the description, the Word document will outline how many points the proposal is. I think it's 5 out of the 100, and it's really just a way for me to get you guys to send me a request so I can start getting data back out to you so you can work on these projects as early as possible. Okay. And really, these are pretty much, as long as like you have a legitimate thought idea, everyone gets 100 on these proposals if they turn them in by time. Or sorry, turn them in on time. You can submit your project to me a little bit early, so about a month before the semester's over, and I will quickly as possible that weekend and next week kind of go through them and try to return them to everyone who turned them in early within a week, kind of suggesting ways that they could kind of improve different sections to kind of, or what they might be missing to make sure they can get the best grade possible, right? So that's the early submission date is April 2nd. Okay. Any questions on that? And then the final submission due date is about a week before the end of the semester, just so I have some time to kind of turn on. It takes me a while to go through all of them. Some people's end up being relatively lengthy, right? Just some examples of ideas. And once again, I'll upload a file that has a longer list of ideas that people have done in the past or ideas I think might be interesting. But like one person looked at superstar power. So this was basically if a team, and this could be, you know, whatever sport you're interested in. Hell, this could be, you know, I don't know. You look at European League soccer, you could look at NBA, whatever sport you're interested in. Does having kind of one of the superstars in that league help improve the economic conditions of a city, right? Maybe average income, unemployment, things like that, right? So I had someone I've actually had a couple people do things related to that. Specifically, I think someone looked at, you know, how do we define superstars? So maybe it's not just their performance, but do people like them, right? So we might look at things like jersey sales and define a superstar as if they're in the top 10 jersey sales or something like that, and see if that brings kind of, you know, additional revenue or whatever, whatever angle we're looking at in terms of how does it boost the city's economy. Right? Substitutes or complements. So this was one of my most unexpected topic, but I thought it was really interesting that someone came up with is the WWE or wrestling and UFC complements or substitutes, right? So they kind of compared pay-per-view dates that were on the same day or really close to each other and said, you know, do we see that when they have events in the same day, does it, you know, overall sales go down, or are they, you know, do they go up? So are they complements or are they substitutes, as opposed to days when they have, you know, their pay-per-views on different, or as opposed to weeks where they have pay-per-views on different days, right? So that one was pretty interesting. I think that, yeah, they had viewer ratings, and then I think they had a couple measures, viewer ratings, and I think they had the overall dollar amount in sales that they were looking at there as well. Ace versus ace. So someone did this idea of, you know, in Major League Baseball, typically they will start their best starter against the other team's best starting pitcher, right? And so this idea of you want to try to match up your best pitcher against the other. Well, what if the other team puts their best pitcher out there and I put my worst pitcher? So I'm pretty sure I'll probably lose that game. But then if I do a 5-man rotation in each of the next 4 games, I'm going to have an advantage because I can put my number 1 up against their number 2, my number 2 up against their number 3, so on and so forth, right? So they use some kind of throughout the season data, and this is a complicated project, and we're able to identify if it was actually advantageous in the playoffs to kind of not start your best against the opponent's best, right? So I don't know. These are just a couple ideas. Like I said, I'll put a longer list in a Word document up on Canvas. I'll create a new folder that says like class project that has these additional files in it. Okay? Any questions on that before we keep moving? I can talk fast. If you guys have had me before, you know, I can kind of get on a roll with things. So you got to stop me, ask a question if you're just interested in stuff. So like I said, I like this course because I like to be asked questions on the spot and us try to kind of think through them together. So never feel bad about stopping me. How to pass the class. So basically, just come to class or Zoom into class and pay attention. If you can't even attend or watch on Zoom, you don't have an excuse. All the YouTube videos are up there as well. So you've got to go through those, right? With my courses the last 2 semesters, for people that I could tell were keeping up with the class, really didn't see a big difference in grades or understanding of the material. But for people that started to kind of miss periods or stop watching the posted YouTube videos, if they weren't able to attend in person, it gets bad, right? So and I know it's harder. It puts a lot more of the onus on you guys to kind of show up and kind of, if you aren't able to show up in person, to make sure you're using those resources to stay kind of keep pace with the class, right? Don't miss classes. It really, really hurts, especially in this class. It's going to hurt a lot. So make sure you're kind of keeping up with it. Do the homework. It's 25% of the grade. If you start getting zeros on the homework, it's going to tank your grade pretty quick, okay? So you need to do the homeworks. Even if it's the last day, you know you don't have enough time, you don't understand it, you can't complete the whole thing, A 50 out of 100 is a hell of a lot better than a 0. A 0 is going to kill your grade. A 50 ain't good, but it's not going to destroy you for the rest of the semester, right? So submit those homeworks. Even if you know that it's not all right, do the best you can, get as many points as possible there. It's just 0s just kill your grade. I'm always wanting to help, and that, you know, with the homeworks, as you're studying for that midterm and the final, with your project, always feel free to reach out. This is like students that I have for this class who come to my office hours or ask for help. It's never a burden because it's always enjoyable because I like sports. So I generally just like talking about, and I also like economics. So I'm like marrying the two and getting to talk about it. So always feel free to reach out. I put office hours here in the syllabus, 2 to 4, Monday, Wednesday, 2 to 3, Tuesday, Thursday. I realize those are common times to have classes. So if they don't work for you and you still want to meet, send me an email. I have or by appointment there for a reason. I'm around the business building probably, 9 to 5 almost every day. So if there's another time slot that works for you, just send that to me an email and I'm sure we can find something that works, okay? I have a GA for this course. I don't know his office hours yet. For whatever reason you don't like me or you're scared of me or something, you could always ask him for help. I'll get those, I'll repost the syllabus once he gets his office hours to me, which I think he has to do by Friday. It might be Monday because of the way that we started this semester, but I should have those within the week and I'll repost a syllabus that has those, okay? So yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, the great Michael Scott. And then I had a class earlier and I use this meme whenever I say how to pass this class in these slides, but does anybody know what to help me help you? Yeah, I had my last class, no one knew it. And also, this is a sports econ. You should all watch Jerry Maguire. It's a great movie. And it actually pertains kind of to some of the topics we might talk about in this class. So anyways, so today, I don't want to go too in depth into material. Because I haven't gotten to play around the system too much, I probably won't even do a lot of review. But we will be doing some review of 201 stuff, and I might start that a little bit today, just a general discussion. But I also just want to introduce the idea of what we're going to do in this class, right? So we kind of went through, the project and the expectations, but you read the title Sports Economics, and it's you can read the course description, but a lot of people maybe think it's kind of like a blow-off course. I would say it's definitely not, and I've had people treat it that way, and I think then realize they wish they would have taken a different elective. We are going to be using economic principles and some statistical principles, just applying them to sport, right? And so I would think about it as we've got different types of questions we can ask in sports economics, right? And just because we're using sports data or sports related topics, we can really take those and translate them to things outside of sport, right? So the one in which we probably can't do that as much is the sports performance questions, right? And these are interesting, but they don't really transfer to things outside of sport as easy. So sports performance would be like, does start times in games affect, player performance, or does traveling across time zones affects the amount of points that a player scores, or, something along those lines? Well, those are all kind of measures of performance in that sport, right? A physical performance. We really can't translate that into like productivity in the workplace per se, right? Maybe we could to a degree, right? But if we're looking at very sport-specific outcomes, that's a lot harder to transfer to other things in the real world. So these are interesting questions, and these are interesting things to look at, but probably not as useful in translating them to other topics. Right? A couple other ones I think, if we're looking at rule changes that were made in any given league, I think, what was the one? What was it last semester? Someone did, the NFL changed the way they do kickoffs. I forget all the exact change, but like they have to stand further back from the kicker. They can't get running starts from a different yard line. And he was looking at how that impacted, I think, the amount of return touchdowns and return yards and things like that. And so you can do that, and that's a viable kind of project, and it's an interesting question. But it's hard to say how does that transfer to any other thing in the real world. This is a very NFL specific policy, right? But we can answer those questions. And Now, the one that starts to have a little bit more transfer to other issues would be firm or kind of player-specific topics, right? So if we're understanding, we think about sports, right, leagues as companies. Well, if we can understand something about a sport company, that will translate into just a regular company as well. So, we could look at things like complementarities. So allowing beer sales at college football games, how did that boost ticket revenue, right? Well, we can think about that as, even if it wasn't a sporting event, if it was anything else, having one more product available, if it's a complementarity in what I'm already selling, I might see a boost in what I was previously selling. We'll talk a lot about kind of profit versus win maximization. And although in the context of sport, we think about this as profit versus win maximization, how that would it'll translate to any other topic. It's just, we wouldn't call it profit and win, we would call it profit versus revenue maximization. But all the principles would apply. And you can think about, when I say profit versus win, it's like if a organization, are they simply trying to increase the profits from this team operating, or are they just trying to win as many games? Because if I want to just win as many games as I can, I'll just spend all the money I have, right? That's not going to generate higher profits per se. We can look at things like, for players, how do they perform, right, in a contract year where they're going to have, their contract is up after the year versus when they're like in the middle of their contract. So this would apply to anyone who's salaried for more than a year. But anyone who's signing a contract to be with a company for more than a year, those same sort of principles would apply. And then kind of the most transferable of topics would be if we think about just general theory that we can use sports data to sports data to analyze, right? So here, how does playing with Tiger Woods impact the players he plays against? So this is more general, we can think about as a superstar effect, right? If I'm going up against someone, even if it's not in sports, if it's maybe in sales, if they're better than me, right, I know that no matter how hard I try, their just general ability is so much higher than mine, I'm never going to be able to beat them, right? Doesn't matter if it's in sports or maybe it's in kind of our sales, right? So that would be one question we have, like, do people perform better when they're going up against someone who's a higher performing ability, or do they just perform worse and give up, right? That's a general kind of theory question in economics, but we can use something like golf data, players playing against Tiger Woods, to understand that. Right? Another example of this would be, do we see discrimination exist? Now, we're going to use sports topics to see if discrimination exists. And one way we could do this, there's actually a paper that we'll try to bring it into the class, which is looking at TV viewership for games in which there was white versus non-white quarterbacks. And to see if there was, holding other things constant, like quality of the team, was there any difference in the TV viewership ratings? Because if there was, that'd be some evidence that maybe there's some consumer discrimination going on. Right? And that's, we're using sport to analyze that, but, if we find discrimination, it's likely that's not just going to exist in the sports, just in sports, but in it kind of more broadly as well. Sunk cost fallacies. So if you've taken 201, hopefully they kind of brought this up. The idea that, look, once I've spent the money, it should no longer influence my future decisions. I should be making decisions on the margin, right? Are the marginal costs lower than the marginal benefits? That sunk cost, that was already spent. That's going to be spent no matter what I do. So we can use sports-related, data to analyze this general question as well, which is, if teams give a really big contract to a player, are they more likely to play him in the future despite what his performance is, or his or her performance, right? And so that's a general question that we can apply to a sports-related, example, but it really is just a general question that could be applied to, firms who are deciding to kind of stay open, right? Because they have these huge sunk costs, despite actually closing down, would actually end up saving them money. So I think that's I like to kind of, bring up that discussion because, and you could probably break it down a little bit differently if you really wanted to. In my, the way I view sports-related research, it usually fits in one of those three categories. And kind of the way in which I went through them, least transferable to other world applications to the most transferable. So we'll go through a few numbers. And I didn't update these for the last year because of weird things with COVID would have distorted some of the numbers that we're going to look at. So I think everything I'm going to show you is, so it wouldn't be for 2020, it would be going back to 2019, right? But if we go back to that year's Super Bowl, right, why does sports matter? I mean, advertising alone for the Super Bowl, one game, is $382 million. It's a lot of money being spent on marketing, right? We can start to analyze, is that worth it, right? Is the amount they're paying actually worth it? You know, there's tons of kind of case studies that have tried to get at this question. But the reason why is because people are spending a lot of money. This is really important to a lot of companies, right? Whether or not these Super Bowl ads are actually kind of, in turn, increasing their revenue more than what they're spending, right? Just some other numbers that are kind of interesting. What was it? The college playoff semifinals, what, 26.9, 21.5, and then the kind of final 28.4 million viewers, which is greater than any other TV show in 2018. So no matter what TV show or kind of event you're looking at, excuse me, the college football playoffs actually had the kind of highest viewership. People spend a lot of money on sports. So if we look at kind of some estimates, I think I grabbed these from Forbes, but the estimate is that overall, the general consumer, like the public, we spend more than $13 billion on the NFL. So that includes, you know, tickets, that includes merchandise, apparel. Here's a couple of the other leagues, right? We can just see, whoops, you know, there's tons of money being spent on these different organizations, right? And here, this is a list of 5. There's other ones I didn't put up here, right? Now, throughout this course, these will probably be the 5 that we kind of mainly focus on, only because they are the 5 highest kind of revenue generating leagues. You know, you could dive into things like the MLS or WNBA or even the PGA, but generally we'll kind of use examples from these top 5 because that's where most of the money is being generated. Okay? But all the same principles would apply. Questions before we keep moving on here? Okay. All right. So let's do a little bit of review of markets, kind of supply and demand, just so we have some terminology. I'll go through kind of drawing more kind of equilibrium and things next class. I've got a few slides that we can kind of at least get a nice visual today. But I just want to do kind of a quick little kind of dip into some old 201 stuff so we can be ready for a kind of more in-depth discussion on Thursday. So we think about a market is going to be a group of buyers and sellers who, you know, buyer of a specific product, right? We've got buyers of a particular product and sellers or producers of a specific product. A competitive market is going to be one in which nobody has influence over the price. No one buyer, no one seller has any influence over the price of that product, right? So why do you think this is going to be a problem once we start to look at sports-related organizations and examples? Right, if we have a competitive market, it means no one buyer or seller has an influence over the price in that market. What do you think is true about the market for professional football games? If we think about it, let's say, putting them on, right? There's a lot of consumers. There's a lot of people who want to buy tickets. How many sellers are there of professional football games? The NFL. There's multiple teams, right? But they're all kind of under the same company of the NFL, right? So this is great. We're going to start from this place where we have a competitive market, but we're quickly going to diverge from that, right? So we're doing the review of a competitive market first, but we have to understand we're probably not going to always have this in a lot of the examples that we end up working through. You know, all goods are going to be exactly the same. So this kind of presents a problem. We have to really be careful when we start to talk about products. So let's say I'm thinking about ticket prices, right? Even if we thought there was a perfectly competitive market, so maybe this is something like there's a lot of colleges that exist maybe in one area, and so the market for college basketball games is pretty competitive in this one area, and we're focused on this one regional area, not here specifically in Muncie, but you know, theoretically this area could exist. Well, the problem is, if we think about ticket prices, and let's say, you know, I think that there might be an equilibrium ticket price. What what's true about different seats in an arena? Would you rather be in the front row or all the way in the nosebleeds, right? Probably in the front row. Would you even maybe pay a little bit more to be in the front row than all the way in the nosebleeds? People do, right? You might not specifically, but a lot of people do. And so when we think about the product, we're talking about an equilibrium ticket price for one specific kind of type of ticket, right? We can't compare first row seats to back row seats, right? So we can, if we narrow down our definition, we can end up with a competitive market. There might be a competitive market when there's multiple college teams in an area for front row tickets, but that equilibrium ticket price won't be the same as for those back row tickets, right? So we have to be really careful about how we define the product we're looking at. Excuse me. With these masks too, I usually drink like at least a bottle of water during class, so I will try my best. I sometimes will get a little bit hoarse. I kind of already mentioned this. No one has any kind of influence over the price. So we think about demand, right? Specifically, we said we have people who demand this product, people who kind of want to purchase or buy this product. Sorry, we have people who want to purchase or buy this product, people who also want to sell this product, right? So the law of demand says, as the price of a good rises, right, the price gets higher, people are going to want to buy less, right? The quantity demanded will fall. Okay? I think this is fairly intuitive. You've already kind of taken 201, so hopefully this idea isn't foreign. But the idea is that eventually, right, as I increase ticket prices, there are going to be fewer and fewer people who are willing to pay that price, right? So demand will fall. We'll kind of denote this. Price will always kind of notate with P. Quantity demanded, we'll kind of write as capital Q with a little subscript D there, right? So we say they have an inverse relationship, right? Because as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Right? That's the law of demand. Everything we're going to do in terms of calculations in this class, we're going to assume that demand is linear. So if you've taken like intermediate micro or some other courses, you might start to work with demand curves that aren't linear. I'm going to keep it simple in the examples that we'll use and the calculations that we do, which is just to keep demand linear. And all the same principles apply if it's not. It's just a little bit harder to calculate things like consumer and producer surplus. Another way that we want to think about this demand curve is that whatever quantity demand that we're looking at, so let's say we're looking at the quantity of 10, right? The price that someone's willing to pay for that 10th unit will essentially be the point that we're on in our demand curve, right? So next class, I'll go over this a little bit more in detail when we have some nice visuals. But the reason why I'm willing to pay, let's say for that 10th unit, I'm willing to pay $10, right? The reason why I'm willing to pay $10 is because it is at least worth $10 to me. If it starts to be worth anything less than that, I'm no longer going to be willing to pay $10 for it. If the value of, say, a ticket only has a value of $9 to me, why the hell would I pay $10 for it? I'm then going to be kind of out $1, right? My benefits will be less than my cost, right? So anytime we think about the price that someone's willing to pay for whatever unit we're looking at, that's because they benefit at least that much from consuming that quantity of that product, okay? Or the idea that we'll pay any price up to whatever my marginal benefit is. If that ticket is worth $9 to me, of course I'll pay $1 for it, because if I pay $1, the benefit to me is $9, my net benefit's $8. I'll pay $2 for it, because if it's worth $9 to me and I pay $2, net benefit's $7. I'll pay $3 and $4 and $5, all the way up to the point where my kind of net benefit is 0, right? I would pay exactly up to however much it would benefit, right? So I would pay exactly $9 in this scenario I've created, okay? So, I always like to teach, I don't know how other professors do it, so I always like to teach kind of thinking about the demand curve is really reflecting to you what that consumer's marginal benefit is for each one of those quantities, right? So if you look at that 10th unit, and on the demand curve, you go up and you find the price someone's willing to pay is $9, excuse me, that's because you know that marginal benefit, that 10th unit, right, if they'll pay up to whatever their marginal benefit is, then that marginal benefit must be $9, right? So you'll pay up to whatever that marginal benefit is. Therefore, that demand curve, we can think of reflects marginal benefit for whatever consumer, whatever kind of market we're looking You know, we also have kind of floating around. I said demand is linear and it's an inverse relationship. But you can think about why is it an inverse relationship? If we think about, you know, going from a quantity of 0 to 1 to 2, 3, 4, if we go to higher quantities, right? Well, I'm always going to be willing to pay the most for that first unit, right? The way that I describe diminishing margin utility to people is, okay, if I don't have a car, right, I'd be willing to pay a lot of money to have that, buy my first car, to have some mode of transportation. So let's say we have to think about it's the same product, the same car, right? So even if it's a beater, right? Even if it's like my first car was a 1987 Buick Century, right? I think I paid like $1,000 for it, right? Because it was worth a lot to me, right? I needed a car to get, you know, so I could work, things like that. Once I have that first unit, that first Buick Century, how much would I pay for a second 1987 Buick Century? Honest to God, I wouldn't give you $1 for it. Like, it's not worth it. I mean, it's not hardly worth anything for me to try to resell it. It's just going to sit. I can only drive one car at a time. If it's the exact same product, potentially marginal benefit could diminish very quickly, and I may only ever find it, you know, optimal to buy one unit of a good. In that car example, that would be, I think, a pretty good example where you could see that. Now, it applies to every other good as well. You know, the other example I always use is, I don't know why that's just like a weird thing, but when I mow the lawn in the summer, I always want like an ice cold High Life, like when I'm done, right? I want a nice ice cold beer. I would give you like $10 probably just to have it waiting for me. But once I've had that one, it's the middle of the afternoon, like I still have things to do. I don't really want a second beer quite as much. It's probably still give you $5 because, you know, 2 beers is better than one. But at some point, right, I have to continue throughout my day. I've got things to do. And really after that first or second, like I'm already cooled down. The third isn't really worth hardly anything to me, right? So there's a lot of things where that first one, the first unit of a product, you'd be willing to pay a lot, but it quickly diminishes, right? So this is kind of the reasoning why we have this kind of downward sloping demand curve or this inverse relationship, okay? If we think about the mathematics behind it, right? The way we write these demand equations, is someone trying to get in back there? Or are they just posting up? I think they're just posting up back there. Maybe not. All right, so the way we write these demand equations is the price that someone's willing to pay is going to be equal to this kind of, we're keeping it linear, right? This linear equation. So we'll have this intercept A, and then we'll have this slope coefficient B. So I said coefficient, sorry. This slope, which is B. Right? So A, representing our intercept, is kind of where our demand curve will start at a quantity of 0. Because if I plug a 0 in for this quantity, 0 times, no matter what B is, 0 times anything is 0. So the price starts out at whatever that value of A is, right? That's our intercept. Okay? So we can think about if I kind of had this demand, I think at Purdue basketball tickets here. I went to Purdue. I'm a fan. Sometimes it's a good thing in basketball, sometimes it's not. We can kind of think about there would be an intercept that this demand equation starts at, and that would be A. Right? The slope of this demand curve is going to be whatever B is. Now we know that B is always going to be negative because we have this inverse relationship. As the price goes up, quantity demanded goes kind of down. Right? Or think about as we look at higher and higher quantities, we said, I might be willing to pay a lot of money for that first ticket, right? $18 here it looks like. But once I get to that fourth ticket, I might only be willing to pay something like $12, right? So there's this inverse relationship. That value of B is going to be negative, okay? I kind of already mentioned the intercept is kind of where the price would be if the quantity was 0, okay? Another way we can think about this slope, is just kind of a review of basic mathematics, right? It's really how much the price is going to fall from a 1 unit increase in quantity. So if quantity goes up by 1, that slope of B is how much the price we'd be willing to pay goes down. Okay? So once again, I'll say that again. That slope, B, right, is how much price would go down or how much we'd be willing to pay goes down from a 1 unit increase in quantity. Okay? Any questions over that? Like I said, I'll likely do a little bit more kind of with some drawings. We have both a supply and demand curve on the same graph next class, but I'm just kind of introducing the idea today. Also, what was that about? Oh, okay, I was going to say. All right. So supply, law of supply is basically the exact opposite, right? Everything kind of works in reverse, because if I'm trying to purchase something, right, then the price is actually a cost to me. But if I'm selling you something, if I can sell it to you at a higher price, I'm now receiving more money, right? So everything's kind of opposite, because for the seller, having a high price is good. It means I'm receiving more money for the product I'm selling. So the idea there is, as the price is higher, I'm willing to actually sell more, right? You know, if I think about, maybe I have like a stockpile of, let's go back to my mowing the lawn example. Let's say I have a 12 pack, right? That very first one, right, that 12th beer, or right, sorry, that first beer I'd be willing to kind of sell at a pretty low price, because I'm probably not going to consume it anyways, right? But if you're telling me, you know, so I'm like, well, you know, to sell that very first one, you know, I'll sell it for, you know, $1 or something, right? If the price is $1, I'll get rid of one of them. The price is $2, well, now I'll sacrifice 2 of those beers. If I can get $3 for each beer, I'll sacrifice 3 of them, so on and so forth, up to the point where, even though I really like having the ice cold beer when I'm done mowing the lawn, if you tell me the price is $100 per beer, I'll sell you the entire 12 pack, right? So the idea is that as that price goes up, the price per unit goes up, I'm willing to sell more of that product. So we have kind of, instead of this inverse relationship, we have this, you know, positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, which, notice we denote that with capital Q with a subscript S, right? Quantity supplied and quantity demanded are going to be different things, until we get to equilibrium, if you kind of are thinking ahead of what you've learned in the past. You know, as I described, the demand curve represents marginal benefit. Excuse me. We can kind of think about that for supply, right? The supply curve is really showing us marginal cost, because as long as I can sell something for, well, if I can sell something for $10 and it only costs me $5 to produce it, well, for sure I'm going to sell, because I'm net, you know, net positive 5 there. And in fact, I'll sell it for $9. I'm still net positive 4. I can sell it for 8 because I'm net positive 3. All the way, and I'll sell it for price all the way down to where it's exactly equal to my marginal cost, right? So the supply curve is really representing, kind of thinking about this as a marginal cost curve, right? It tells me the marginal cost at each quantity of that good. So demand, think about it as the marginal benefit curve. Supply kind of represents our marginal cost curve. And I kind of already mentioned this, but, you know, you can think about it as, well, sorry, I didn't mention this. I mentioned that we have a kind of positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. And one of the reasons kind of why is we don't have diminishing marginal benefits here like we did with demand, but we do have increasing marginal costs, right? To produce the very first unit of a good, I'm going to use all of my cheapest, you know, I'm going to use the cheapest materials first, right? But once I run out of those, I have to then pay a little bit higher, maybe to, you know, the next cheapest material. So to continually produce more and more and sell more and more, excuse me, my costs are going to start rising, because I'll deplete whatever resources I was initially using at the lowest cost. I'll have to move on to the next lowest cost materials, so on and so forth. Okay. So this idea of increasing marginal cost is the reason why we kind of have this upward sloping supply curve, or this positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. So we can think about, just like we did with the demand equation, we have this supply curve, right? So I did, you know, the supply for Purdue basketball tickets once again here. You kind of think about here, A is going to be the intercept of my supply curve, and B is going to be the slope of my supply curve. So the way we interpret that value of B is very similar to demand, right? Instead, now it's a 1 unit increase in quantity would, you know, kind of predict the price that I would need to be able to sell that additional unit would be B amount higher, right? The price that I would, you know, would have, you know, to require to sell that 1 additional unit will go up by whatever B is. Okay? So if we know there's a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, we know that B is going to be positive for the supply curve. Okay? Now I didn't get this to extend all the way down because I apparently didn't have my axis go below 0. But what's true about the value of my intercept in this visual? if I like extended this curve, the intercept would be down here, which would make it negative. Right? Does it have to be negative? Not necessarily, right? The supply curve could start up here and then go right here, right? So when we think about the value of the intercept, it doesn't have to be positive or negative, right? It could, you know, it could be either, right? So, you know, here I have an example where it could be negative because typically you'll see a supply curve drawn where it has a positive intercept, right? But, you know, we may see one that has kind of a negative intercept there. It doesn't usually make a whole lot of sense, but in some of the examples that we're going to talk about, it actually will. Probably in your 201 courses, you didn't see something like that because it doesn't apply to kind of general products, but some of the products like ticket sales and things we'll talk about, there may be this idea that you could have this kind of negative intercept. What else do I want to say here? We kind of already talked about all this, right? The idea of the intercept would be, this is kind of where price would start out if the quantity sold was 0. Any questions on this? Like I said, this should be kind of a review, but I just want to get some of this out of the way. What time are we? Okay. So I think, well, let me see. I think I have a slide here real quick. Maybe I'll save that till next class. So we'll do some more like demand supply shift stuff next class. We'll talk about equilibriums. And I'm going to post that first article I want you to read. So I've got it right here, actually. Oops. And I'll create a folder that says, sorry, actually, I already created it. It says course readings. I've actually already put some files in there. The one that I want you to read, well, I think it's this one. Let me see. I forget now that what I labeled them. Effective beer sales. Is this the same one? This is a little bit different, isn't it? Yeah. Trying to remember which one's the easiest. I think this is the one I want you to read. Yeah, so this is the one I want you to look at. So beer sales and attendance 2. I want you to just give it a quick look at that before class on Thursday. I mean, honestly, all I expect you to really do, the abstract is usually a very short summary of the article. Read the abstract, maybe kind of skim through, read a little bit this introduction, and they'll go back down. And then a lot of the times in these academic papers, the conclusion will be called like discussion or discussion and remarks or something like that. I want you to kind of just go through and skim through this discussion as well. I should give you just a general understanding of what the paper is trying to do, and then I'll kind of point out different parts of the paper that'll kind of mimic like what your projects will end up looking like, and we'll kind of start to discuss some of those findings a little bit more in depth. And then after class Thursday, I'll post an online quiz. And one of the questions will probably be something related to the reading, right? Now, we'll discuss it. If you listen and pay attention, they should be very easy questions, right? But if you didn't listen or you missed class and you didn't watch the video, you could very easily get it wrong. But if you're in class, the question should be relatively easy when I'm asking you questions about these course readings. I'll probably also have a couple questions on that online quiz, just more generally about you guys. So in the slides, if we go back here, I know you're probably all itching to get out. It's the first day, so we will end a little bit early, but I'll kind of mention a couple of things. Where did I have it? So I'm going to have these questions on there as well. It's really just me trying to understand like who you guys are. So I'll probably create one where it's like short answer or where you just type in kind of your reason why you took the course. But these are the 3 that help me kind of know how to guide the class a little bit, especially early on. Just what your major is, what your kind of assignment is in terms of sophomore, junior, senior. I don't think we would have any freshmen here potentially, but actually, yeah, we might. And then what the highest math course you've taken is. If you think, if you've taken the business, I don't know what they exactly call it. It's not business calc, but maybe they call it business calc. If that, I don't want you to answer that if you've taken 221. I'm really more concerned about kind of statistics. You should have all taken 221, but if some of you have something higher than that, so if some of you have taken econometrics or there's an advanced stats course in the business college or anything else in the math department, those are the courses that I want to know. I'm going to kind of start out thinking the highest you've all taken is econ, kind of business stats, and anything over that business calculus that you've taken from the math department or anything over business stats you've taken in the business college. I'm interested in what those courses are. If the highest you've done is 221, that's fine. That'll be kind of that question. But I'll put that up Thursday, so I'll mention this again on Thursday. Okay. Any questions for me? No? Are you guys excited for another semester of wearing masks in class and not being able to attend every single class? All right, well, we'll end it there. I'll see you guys on Thursday. Look for those materials I'll be posting on the projects. Maybe skim through those for next class as well. Other than that, have a good day, and I'll see you guys on Thursday. Good here.